Hey, this is Marc, Katz, dating coach for smart, strong, successful women and your personal trainer for love. Welcome back to the Love You podcast, where you can learn everything you need to know about dating, relationships, sex, and men from a man's point of view. And today we're going to dive in with an admission. I don't understand introverts. That's not an attack on introverts. It's anything pretty humbling for me. My job is to understand people and work with people and appreciate the nuances of dating and relationship dynamics. And one of my blind spots is the ability to understand introverts, because I'm so the opposite, right? I'm an extrovert. I've never had a thought that I haven't expressed out loud, and I lead a very introverted life. I mean, I work from home. I don't commute. I do a lot of writing. So there are weeks I barely even leave the house. But my personality type is to be around people. I get energized around people. And that's not particularly unusual. But when you sort of dive into the research, and the minimal research I did, I realized that over 50% of the world is introverted, which means that there's a growth curve. There's a lot to understand about introverts and learn from introverts. The issue, and part of the reason that we're diving into this introvert-extrovert thing, again, it's not to throw introverts under the bus. It's really to find out what kind of pairing is going to work for you as a couple. There's introverts, extroverts, extroverts, and the cross pairing. So by the end of this podcast, we're really going to talk about what may work best for you. First, let's start with a definition. Introverts, I've always been taught, but was actually recently just challenged, are people who get energized by retreating to their nest, right? Extroverts come alive around people. They're going to get energy from being around people. Introverts have a smaller tolerance for being around other people and are more likely to recharge by being home alone. At least that's the going story. 10 minutes ago, I was reading on my phone an article that was linked to me from the New York Times. I'm not going to be able to cite it, that challenged that. So this is new information for me too. But basically they said introverts and extroverts do get the same energy about being around people, but rather introverts have essentially a lower tolerance for it. They just need less of it. So an extrovert wants to be the first person at the party and the last person to leave. The introvert still enjoys being at the party, just they can get what they need in an hour and a half of it. And that sounds like it might be even a better definition. Being an introvert doesn't mean that you are necessarily a misanthrope who doesn't like people. The problem, as I see it, is that the world is largely geared towards extroversion. And again, that's not a slam on introverts. The perception of introverts, and this is what I got from doing a little online research, right? The perception of introverts is that they are aloof or weird or insecure or boring. And that's not true any more than the assumption that all extroverts are toxic, soul-sucking narcissists who are tone deaf to other people's needs. Sometimes that can be true, but for the most part, that's not the whole story. Introverts have a ton of strengths. They're imaginative, and they're focused, and they're good listeners, and they're peaceful, and they're often more humble. And so the perception that they may be shy or rude is not necessarily reality. It's that they only talk when they feel they actually have something to say, where extroverts will talk for no reason whatsoever. And what makes this even more complicated, and it's tough to acknowledge this, people don't always want to hear it, is that perception is reality, right? How we identify matters to a degree in terms of our own self-esteem, but ultimately it's about how people judge us. If I think that I should be a male model. That's not going to happen just because I think I'm really good looking. If I think I should run an investment bank because I'm a really bright guy who's got a good math SAT score, well, that's silly. My own perception of my intelligence is therefore irrelevant. It's actually how others perceive you. So if you're quiet and withdrawn, if you don't socialize that much, and you don't share your thoughts with anybody outside your inner sanctum, what conclusions can people draw about you? Right? And that's one of the tricky things about being an introvert in a world that highly values first impressions. Introverts are not always geared towards dating, where you have to make a strong first impression in a really short period of time. You got 90 minutes to make the impression that makes someone want to go out with you a second time. And that's, I'm a coach for women, but if, men are listening to that. If you're an introverted man and you go on a date and you don't assert your personality because you're just asking questions and kind of being quiet and getting a feel for the room, or you're uncomfortable in any way, and making an extreme case, but that's not always going to be the best for dating, right? Introverts probably, my guess is that they're even better in relationships because they might be more intuitive or soft-spoken or better listeners. But to get that first date, to make that strong first impression, to build up connection and chemistry, it's often an extrovert's world. So if dating involves a certain amount of advertising, sometimes it feels like introverts are advertising themselves with it's like you're putting out a product that's just got a blank white label, and we have to sort of guess what's inside. Terms I always use, it's never right and wrong, it's effective or ineffective. What works, what doesn't. We're not going to try to suggest that anybody is wrong. We're just trying to observe reality. Here's how it works. What's working for you, what's not working for you, and who should you ultimately pair with. You can change to accommodate your partner. If you're an extrovert, you could accommodate your partner's needs. If you're an introvert, you could go be more extroverted to be with that partner, or you could pair with someone who's just like you. My wife and I are both extroverts. She's a stay-at-home mom. I work from home. We have a really, really active social life. We need to be around people. So at the end of the day, we need to talk, we need to connect, we need to get out of the house. And sometimes that flips over. She's even more extroverted than I am. So sometimes I'll notice that we're booked for 4 straight days, and I love going out, and I don't want to go out for 4 straight days. And so there's a cost sometimes to being with an extrovert who always needs to be out and about, always needs to talk, right? Is not going to have a moment of silence in the home. At the same time, what we have works for us because, I don't love silence. I like to hear what's on my wife's mind. I feel more connected to her when we're out and when we're sharing. My sister, on the other hand, is an introvert, and she married an introvert. They are perfectly content, my sister and her husband, staying at home. They don't have a ton of friends. They don't socialize very much. He could play video games. She could read books. They've got 2 kids, and for them to be in crowds is somewhat draining and overwhelming. Even though they have wonderful personalities, it's their choice is to be the life that they build works. The best example that I know of a introvert-extrovert pairing is my friend Carol Allen and her husband Bill. Carol's like me, an extroverted writer. Her husband's an extreme introvert. We're seeing them tomorrow night, but we're driving to their neighborhood, their house, and it's going to be a short affair. The way Carol and her husband handle things is they usually take separate cars to parties. She'll come early and stay late. He'll stay for an hour and a half, and that just the separate car thing has largely saved their marriage because they have such different ways of operating. So when we come back from the break, we're going to talk more specifically about issues that come up around introvert-extrovert pairings, how we're going to navigate them. I'm excited to share it with you. My name's Marc Katz. This is the Love You Podcast, and we'll be right back.